Salutations from space and aloha from Earth, friends. It's Gemini Brett back home in Seattle. And this is the fifth and last of our Stellarium training videos. Like the previous ones, I will state that I'm not your Stellarium IT guy. All right. But these are videos that you can utilize if you choose to, and this is totally optional, if you choose to put Stellarium on your computer. It's totally free for Mac and for PC. It's an amazing software. I will utilize it to show a lot of the course content along with some other softwares. And I encourage you to play with it and to cast your birth chart from an astronomy point of view and to start looking at the astronomy in comparison to other astrology charts. Really just help us connect the nature and the theory. All right, so let me share my screen real quick, and I will just show you that you can find Stellarium at stellarium.org and click on your operating system, and it will begin downloading. I went through this a little bit in the first training video. I will say it's totally different, the PC-based, the computer-based, whether you use Mac or PC, it's totally different than the tablet Stellarium app or the phone Stellarium app. Those are cool, but they're completely limited in comparison to what we will utilize here. Let's, for the astrology of the thing, check out the chart of this moment now, 8:47:32 p.m. on January 7th, Sunday, the day of the sun. And again, I'm at home in Seattle, Washington. We have the 6th degree of Virgo on the rise, with Mercury at the galactic center, heading for a January 12th conjunction with Saturn. Venus applying to Sun to conjoin exterior exactly tomorrow. Pluto in the house, and Mars and Jupiter conjoined in Scorpio yesterday in this beautiful sextile. But we are here to talk about this from a sky point of view, so I'm going to close this intrepid astrology software, and we will open Stellarium. Now, since I recorded the last video, I've been playing with Stellarium as I often do, and it looks like I'm at the Tropic of Capricorn now and some other themes. I think the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to restore to defaults. So all the things you've seen me change and save in videos 1 through 4 are going away as I click that button, and I'm going to get out of Stellarium, and we'll get back in, and we'll see how this is probably going to look a little bit different. I'm surprised to see we're still at the Tropic of Capricorn and the ground's still away. I'm not sure too many things changed actually when I said return to defaults. Try that again. So restore default should take us back to the very beginning, and I think Stellarium tends to launch in France where it was created. That was probably what you will notice right here. We are actually somehow in Seattle. Maybe it's just defaulting to my computer's location. I'm wondering how it knows. But anyway, I'm going to get out of full screen just so I can see my camera here, which you probably didn't lose anyway. And I am going to do a whole bunch of things. So our primary missions are to look at a few menus that we didn't look at yet, the keyboard shortcuts and the sky and viewing options for the celestial markings. But before I go there, I just want you to see a couple things. One, I found this actually during the course of the training videos. We can hit these play buttons, and that leaves the side and the bottom menus up, which I'm sure I will change for different videos that I create. But it's a convenient thing to have here, especially in this training zone. These are these meteor showers that I'm very fond of taking away. And I'm going to show you how we can take them away permanently, which is something that I will do, at least for this course. All right, so first of all, setting a default location. I mean, you might want to do this where you are. I'm just going to set the default location somewhere besides where I want it. And so I just went somewhere in Algeria, and I use current location as default. And that means when I close Stellarium and then open back up, it's going to be in that place in Algeria. But I want to make Seattle, Washington, where I live, the permanent location. And I want to have these things, these menus up, these play buttons down here as permanent settings that I will save. And I think I'll save out of full screen mode, which just helps me when I'm bouncing back and forth between different softwares like the astrology software and the astronomy software. So I'm going to set the default location to Seattle, where I live, where I'll be recording most of the live transmissions for the course. And it's actually a very good location, Seattle, for us to utilize as we engage with this marriage of heaven and earth, because it's a pretty extreme latitude in Seattle, northern hemisphere. We have some southern hemisphere students, and I love that because they will keep me true to the earth as a whole and not just one hemisphere. But we will start and utilize mostly northern hemisphere transmissions, because astrology and the way that the chart maps the heavens, these mechanisms were defined in the northern hemisphere. All right, so Seattle is a place where we will be looking from often, but I encourage you to set your location, or maybe your birth location, as your default. So I just click Seattle. I can see that I'm here. I know this is true for the Seattle latitude and longitude. Altitude, I'm a little lower than that, but that's okay. And I'm going to write use current location as default. And then here into the configuration window, or as I like to say, monkey wrench star, and I'm going to click save settings. And this means that if I close Stellarium and open again, I should see these menus up. I should see Seattle as my default location. And also it won't be full screen when I start up again. So I'm going to close out and come back into Stellarium. And we will see if those settings took. So first thing to do is set your default location. And then we will work with the time. So this is right now, and that's fine with me, although I would like to pause it. All right, so let's get into these menus. And I wanted to also look at this just kind of coming from the default and moving in. So if I move some hours ahead and we'll get to sunrise tomorrow, we'll see that the standard setting is to have the atmosphere around, and that the standard landscape, which we find in the sky in viewing options over here at landscape, is part of my pronunciation, but Gerens, where Stellarium was created. And I'm going to start working with a 0 horizon. It's actually not as convenient for some of the things that I will be teaching in our course. And I'll show you why. And when that's the case, we'll go to a different horizon. But I do like this 0 horizon. It's just very basic, and it basically maps the chart, right? The 1st through the 6th house is below the ground, and the 7th through the 12th above. I'm also going to make taking the atmosphere away part of my default settings. This is pretty amazing, this Sun, Saturn, Mercury gathering tomorrow. So I'm going to go back to now, and this is the button for now, and pause. And this is the button for atmosphere, which we've seen before. But I'm really encouraging you, as I've just kind of come into these recently, to know these keyboard shortcuts. And of course, it's a thing to learn them, but you just get used to it as you play, as we do with all these wonderful tools, these softwares, right? So again, I'm going to take my meteor showers away. And I think maybe first I'm going to show you how to do that permanently, and then how to also add some other menu options that are not in the standard or default set. So to do that, we go to the configuration window, and this is where we will look at keyboard shortcuts, which is under tools here, I believe. No, navigation. Okay, edit keyboard shortcuts. I'm going to do that last. Right now I want to go to this plugins page. All right. So there's a few things I would encourage you to add to your Stellarium. And I don't know how many of these we will play with during the course of these 6 lessons that begin very soon as I'm recording this today. The first live lesson will be recorded and broadcast on January 10th on Miércoles, Mercury's Day, Wednesday. So one thing I'm going to do is look at these meteor showers, all right, and you'll see that that's already selected. Meteor showers load at startup. For some reason, Stellarium, at least for me, won't allow me to save this setting where the meteor showers don't show up every time I start up. And since I'm not really interested in them right now, I'm just going to take this button away altogether. So I unclick the load at startup for meteor showers, and I configure. And I'm actually going to close that. I'll go back in there, save these settings, and I want to see that took, which is a decent thing to do sometime. Look at all this stuff. We changed this, I think, in lesson 3 or 4, the info. So we're going to get back into that too. So I'm quitting my Stellarium. I'm opening again. I thank you for your patience as we walk through the shenanigans. And one thing that I see is that meteor shower button is gone. And I'm actually happy about that right now. I can always bring it back in. And the way that I would bring it back in is to go in my configuration window, go to plugins, go down to meteor showers here, and click load at startup. And I'm not putting it on there, but I will put on angle measure, okay, load at startup. Archeo lines, which we'll look at a little bit, a few lessons into the course, load at startup. Not really so interested in the novae, the compass marks. It is interesting that that's not at load at startup, because I thought that was the cardinal directions, which are right here in the shortcut Q, but it's something else. Actually, I do want compass marks. I'll show you what that is. And I'm really interested in these navigational stars, which I don't know that we'll use so much, but I'm putting it on my menu too. Pulsars, quasars, cool stuff. Remote control is to utilize Stellarium as a driver for a computerized telescope. We're not doing that. We're not worried about that. Telescope control, you can imagine, does a similar thing. All right, so I'm good with what we just added. Okay, so angle measure, archeo lines, and compass marks. And then personally, I took navigational stars away. I'm interested in what 3D sceneries is. I'm actually going to add that. No, I'm not. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the main. I'm going to save those settings, and I'm going to close down and start back up again. And you'll see that the ones that I just added loaded at startup. And I'll just show you briefly what they do. So first, the angular measure tool, and that is here. It looks like an acute angle, right? And you can see that default, at least for Mac, the keyboard shortcut, which shows up as over here when I hover above that control, is Command A. And it's a good one to know. So when I click on that, I can drag an angle measure. Okay. So like I could see from Rigel to Sirius, for example. Actually, I have to click and drag. And once I do, it'll stay there. Okay. And we can measure angular distances between things like these bright stars of the sacred hoop, Rigel and Sirius, in our sky. And so I can either click here, angle measure, to take it off, or I could hit Command A on the Mac and it's gone. And I'm out of that mode, right? And you can see when I click it, it gets bright, and I can unclick it and it's gone. this is the Archeo lines or archaeoastronomy tool, which is actually really amazing. One of the lessons, we will find our way to the amazing lunar standstill cycle, so don't worry about what that is right now, or cross quarters you might already know, but they are very powerful things in the realm of sacred astronomy, and they have been honored in the way the ancients showed in stones of circle in different sites around the globe, this marriage of heaven and earth. So there's that. Looks like Stonehenge kind of, right? The lintels, and that goes away now. I mean, basically it's showing the sun in the lintels, which is a representation of some of the solstice alignments at Stonehenge, I imagine. All right, and then this is the last one we added. This is the compass marks. And there's no shortcut for compass marks. I might choose to add one. How do I know there's no shortcut? Again, I'm looking over here. As I hover the mouse above angle measure, we see Command A. I see Command U for archeo lines, and I see nothing for compass marks. What are compass marks? Instead of seeing the quadrant directions, east, south, west, get a flatter horizon here, they'll go away and they bring in the azimuth measures. So this is something we'll speak about, I think, in the second lesson of the course. But just to tell you right now, the defaults are that north is 0 and also therefore 360 degrees. That east, and I can quickly jump to east using the keyboard shortcut Shift E, is 90 degrees. Right? South is 180 degrees. So here's Shift S. And west, Shift W, is 270 degrees. That's true for both hemispheres. All right. So now I'm going to go back to the quadrant marks, which I have in my default startup, and cardinal markings. You'll see cardinal points if I hover here is Q. All right. So I could just hit Q and I'll replace those compass marks with the cardinal directions. In the Northern Hemisphere, I like to start up looking south, and we will learn why very soon. The answer is that's where the midheaven is. I'm going to zoom in so I can kind of barely see the east and the west, right? Which is pretty much humanly impossible when I'm staring south, isn't it, on the earth? But it is a thing that we can do in the software, and that's a wonderful tool. So I'm going to go to configuration window, and I'm going to hit save view. And that means when I start up, I'm going to have this image that I created here looking south with east and west kind of on the sides and a pretty flat horizon. All right. So let's head into the sky and viewing options window, and then we'll finish in the keyboard shortcuts. There might be some other things that I have to find along the way. One thing, actually, you know what, before I go there, I'm going to go to information. We did this in one of the previous trainings, but then I just returned to my default settings, right? So I'm going to go customized here, and I like the name. Eventually we'll work with right ascension and especially declination, but not at the beginning. I do want ecliptic coordinates of date. I'm not so interested in size and type or constellation right now, but you might want to leave those up. You know, it's really up to you. The magnitude, you know, I will actually leave visual magnitude up because we'll be speaking about how some of these stars we can see in city skies, or some we cannot. Supergalactic coordinates or hour angle declination, not for me right now, though I will leave azimuth and altitude up. I think distance is a very interesting thing to start connecting to with these different stars, and I didn't leave that up in the training video where we looked at this menu, but I'm going to leave it up this time. The sidereal time and additional information are going away. And so I've really trimmed that down, right? And so now I'll go to main, save my settings, all right? So if I click on Aldebaran, a much shorter list now, we see that Aldebaran is less than 1 in magnitude, all right? Magnitude, it's strange, but the lower means the brighter. And less than 1 is very bright. Aldebaran's a very bright star. azimuth and altitude. So you can see here that the azimuth is 166 degrees and it's moving, which means that my stellarium is moving through time as well. I'm going to hit pause there and we'll see that it just paused at 70 degrees azimuth. Well, if we get to our compass marks, there's Aldebaran at 100 and wait, what? Oh, sorry, that's the ecliptic longitude. I'm looking at 166 degrees and 23 minutes. Here's 166.23, right, Aldebaran? And this is the altitude, 58 degrees, 20 minutes, where 0 is the horizon, 90 is the zenith directly overhead. And I could use my angle measure tool. It's hard to get very precise with this, but to, you know, relatively confirm that that's true, first of all, if I draw a perpendicular down to the horizon, I'll see that it aligns around 166 degrees azimuth and that the altitude's about 58 degrees, 20 minutes, right? So this thing, this angle measure tool, not exact. This is, right? Now I can't do that for what's the distance between Procyon and Betelgeuse. Yeah, so this angle measurement tool is amazing. And you'll see how if we extend it out, it's really going to curve as we're moving through space, because while I'm playing with a flat computer screen and the big screen is not flat, right? We have the curvature of Earth's atmosphere. All right, so there's a little bit of how I'm going to work with the info. And again, you can do what you want. It's interesting to see that Aldebaran is 66, almost 67 light years from Earth. So the light we see when we engage with Aldebaran was cast from that beautiful star almost 67 years ago. I'm seeing ecliptic obliquity here, which I did not necessarily mean to keep around. So I'm back into my configuration window and information, and I'm wondering where that ecliptic obliquity is. And I'm not really sure why it's showing up. I guess maybe it's part of the ecliptic coordinates, which surprises me. Anyway, that's staying in for now. And the ecliptic coordinates, by the way, we looked at this before. This is basically where the star or planet or whatever I click on is in the tropical zodiac, and certainly we'll be tuning into that during the course of the course. But the general scene there is that 0 degrees Aries is 0 in the ecliptic measurement. To show this better, let's go over to sky and viewing options menus, and one of the menus here at the top that we really didn't get to look at yet, and this is the markings menu. Okay, so there's a few markings I will encourage you to keep on and to save as your settings. One is the ecliptic. Okay, that's the path of the sun in our sky, because it's the plane of Earth's paths about the sun in our annual orbit. And here's the ecliptic. Ecliptic of date, we'll work with of date, right? So that's this moment now, basically, because that's where I'm paused in Stellarium at this moment. But if I go back to like 20,000 BC, it's going to show me the ecliptic at that time. So I'm clicking the ecliptic and we'll see this golden curve come in, and certainly we'll be speaking deeply about just what that is. That will be the primary subject of the secondary lesson for very good reasons. The second lesson of this course, I'll leave it there. All right, so ecliptic of date, I like. Also the horizon, because when we take the ground away, it is good to see. By the way, I'm going to go in here, I'm going to hit Q and replace those angle measures with the cardinal directions. I'm going to right click in the planetarium, and that will take away whatever I was just clicked on. And I'm going to now hit G, the keyboard shortcut for ground, and we'll see that when I take the ground away, we've got the sun down here in the, looks like the cusp of the 5th and the 6th maybe. Take the ground away and I still see the horizon, so I can see where that ground is. Wonderful. Well, usually I would have another keyboard shortcut, M, to bring in the meridian line, but what you might have noticed is that the Milky Way went away. All right. So that's a keyboard shortcut that I want to change because I personally like to have meridian up and meridian as a keyboard shortcut. It's something I use a lot and that I bring in and out a lot. And in the first lesson, we'll really speak about what the meridian is and how the meridian and the horizon work together to form the cross of matter that we draw as the earth glyph, the cross of matter inside the circle of spirit. So I'm clicking the meridian line and I'll show you how to change a keyboard shortcut to keep it around. Other curves will work with a lot of the stuff. I don't need to have it up as my default when I start the program. I do want to show you the celestial equator, which just reads like equator. So equator of date, this blue curve. And we'll be speaking about what that is during the course of the first lesson of this course. But one thing I will say is that in a way, the ecliptic is sun, spirit, and the equator is earth, is matter, and that the tropical zodiac begins, most of us would say, where the two intersect. They do intersect in two places. These are the equinox points. And we can also bring in those equinox points, equinoxes of date. And you'll see, and I love this from the astronomy software, that they're using the Aries glyph to show the Aries point and the Libra glyph to show the Libra point. Also on the ecliptic, where the ecliptic, in a sense, at the bendings of the Earth-Sun relationship, or the furthest the ecliptic gets from the celestial equator, are the tropicos. The tropics are the solstice points. All right, so I'm going to also click solstices of date. And then I see the Cancer marking here. This is tropical Cancer, which is on the hand of the high man, Orion, in our day and age, part of the magical mystery of galactic alignment, where our solstices are currently aligned to the galactic cross. The galactic cross is another wonderful thing to look at. I can bring in the galactic equator, which is basically the mean Milky Way, and see where the galaxy, our larger neighborhood, and that plane crosses the ecliptic, which is the local neighborhood of our solar system. And now I'm getting way ahead of us, and I'm going to take away many of these things. So I'm going to leave the solstices and equinoxes in default. We'll see how long they last. Yeah, I'm probably going to take them away when we get into the first course, but I'll leave them there for now. But I am going to take the galactic equator away and also the equator, the celestial equator away. So what I've got checked is cardinal points, which is checked by default, meridian, horizon, ecliptic. Those ones I suggest you have on and leave on as we're learning our way through the sky. And then equinoxes of date and solstice of date. So what are these other options? Well, you see a lot. You can choose J2000 or of date. Again, we'll work with of date. So I can get equatorial grids, which takes the equator and divides it into a grid. There's an azimuth grid. In both of those, equatorial grid and azimuth grid are in the lower menu down here. And they have these keyboard shortcuts, equatorial grid E, which I'm going to change, and azimuth grid Z, which I probably will leave for a while, but I'm feeling that might change eventually too. Ecliptic grid is a very powerful thing if we want to see the tropical zodiac in the sky using Stellarium. Well, the ecliptic grid starts with 0 at the Aries point. Right, tropical 0 degrees Aries. These are 15-degree divisions. Every sign 30 degrees. Okay, so 1530 there's Taurus. 1530 there's 0 degrees Gemini. 15 degrees Gemini, or 1530, 45, 60, 75, and somewhere between 60, 0 degrees Gemini, and 15 degrees Gemini at 75 is Aldebaran, currently mapping to projecting to 10 degrees tropical Gemini in our modern day tropical zodiac. And we will be looking at a whole bunch of that stuff. But right now I'm going to right click which for me on my Mac trackpad, I've set up in, general computer settings as a 2-finger click. And we're going to get back into these, and I'm going to take that ecliptic grid away, but you can see there what it is, and we'll be working with that at length. Here's the menu for the azimuthal grid. And that's just coming from those compass points that we looked at before, but showing how they move from the horizon all the way up to the zenith and to the nadir, zenith being directly over our head, and nadir, we can't see it, but directly below our feet through the other hemisphere, directly over their heads, right? All right, so that's what that is, taking that out. Solstices, equator we looked at, ecliptic horizon, galactic equator we looked at, super galactic equator, that's a whole nother thing we're not even going to do in the course of this first course. I'm not sure what OC longitude is, and I'm fascinated by it now, but I'm going to leave it out. Also, get this grid out of here. Coolers, I don't know what that is, but I'm excited to learn. All right, so that's going out. Celestial poles of date, interesting things. We'll look at that a little bit during the first course, I think. Ecliptic poles, or during the first class, ecliptic poles maybe in the second class. Certainly when we start talking about precession of the equinoxes and such. Galactic poles and supergalactic poles we're not going to worry about. Prime vertical is a very interesting thing, and we might get to that during this course. I'm not sure. But if we talk about the vertex, the east point, we'll get into prime verticals are wonderful points in astrological correspondence. Circumpolar circles, super cool. Not going to use them. Precession circles, also super cool, and we will look at those, but not now. So the things I would encourage you to have checked are ecliptic, horizon, meridian, and cardinal points. And if you'd like, actually, you know what? You can keep the equinoxes and solstices checked if you'd like, but I'm going to take them away. We're going to bring them in the second class. Okay. So there's just a quick run through these markings. And, you might want to stick one in and say, well, what is that? And then do a little research, right? And the software will teach you a lot if you choose to engage with it as a teacher. Many different perspectives we can look at. I showed this in one of the previous training videos. I'm sticking with stereographic. All right, so I just selected a bunch of stuff and changed a bunch of stuff. And I'm going to, before I save my settings, I'm going to bring the ground back in, which is keyboard shortcut G, or this button here, ground. And I'm actually going to take the constellations out, which is keyboard shortcut C, or this button here. Okay. So there's a few things I changed in one of the previous training videos that have gone away. And I'm going to look to that now. Kind of wondering what this business is over there. Some kind of horizon lights. I don't know. So first of all, I'm going to save these settings. Usually I have constellations in my own personal play with Stellarium, but just knowing where I'm going to start with us in the course, actually don't want the constellations in yet. Constellations and tropical signs are very different things. Constellations and sidereal signs are very different things as well. It sounds like we might have a Vedic astrologer or two, students in the first journey through this sacred astronomy material, which is really excites me. Just like having friends from the southern hemisphere, it can kind of keep me true to the fact that there are more than one zodiac. But to transmit the tropical signs first, it can actually be a little bit easier not to have the constellations in. Certainly we will bring them in, and we will bring in fixed star work also as we move along. But since that's not happening for now, I'm actually going to take the star names away. It can be great to leave up and start learning your way through some of these bright stars. We looked at that in a previous training video, and I'll show you how you can turn them on and off once again and increase how many stars you're seeing with names. First of all, I just made a lot of, changed a lot of settings. So I'm going to go to main, save settings. Okay. And now I'm going to go in here to the sky options, and I'm going to go to sky itself. And I want stars in, but I'm not going to choose the labels to be on. Again, this is a slider. You can bring in too many stars to see at once, or just very few. You know, Sirius is going to be the first one to pop up, right? Brightest star in our sky. And we can see as I move the slider, stars popping in by brightness, which is low number magnitudes, right? And it looks like there may be, actually, I think these colors are actually describing the color of the stars. I can say that for sure. Aldebaran, a very orange star. Same thing for Merodach and Hamal, right? So that's a very cool thing in Stellarium as well. It just helps you if you're out in the sky, and then bringing that inside and to help you keep your place. All right, so for me, labels and markers are going away for the stars. So is Twinkle, and I know we did this before. I like my Milky Way brighter than this. I'm going to 2.35 if I can. Oh, 2.3, that'll work for me. Zodiacal light brightness. Yeah, and you can see some stuff changing on the horizon. I'm really not going to speak about what the zodiacal light is in this course. It's super cool, but I'm not going there. Dynamic eye adaptation. I don't know what that is, but that's staying. And again, you know, you've played with software before. Just have your way through this thing. One thing I did show in a previous training video was show planetary orbits and how you can choose different colors for the different planets. So that's something I am going to set up. For me, I like Venus as green. And I like this clover or moss green a whole lot more than this spring thing. But in Stellarium, it's nice to have bright colors show up. All right, so Venus for me is going to be that spring green. Mars wants to get pretty red. And I'm going with this one I can't pronounce. The orbit of Saturn, I would often go black for Saturn or lead, right? But that's not going to show up. I might try something like steel for Saturn. We'll see. I'm going to do some kind of oranges for Jupiter. Tangerine feels okay. But it looks pretty similar to the ecliptic, so I might change that later. Orbit of Earth for me, maybe more of this kind of moss green. Or maybe I'll go blue like the oceans. Doing aqua. Anyway, you can play with that stuff. Now I have Earth and Neptune set to be the same. I don't want similar ones. For some reason, Neptune's going with this purplish number. Oh, that's Uranus, actually. For me, Uranus, kind of grape, and Neptune's going to get that orchid. Great. And then we have all of these different colors. One more, Moon, who I'm not actually seeing here. I'll give Mercury a pretty bright blue-green vibe. Can you see the Moon here? Separate colors for orbits by object type. Separate colors for orbits of major planets only. I'm going to do that one. And then know all the red ones left over are like asteroids and other beings. And I'm sure I'm going to adjust that later. But basically, that's how to do it. All right. Still, I would like to see Moon, who I am not seeing here at all, which interests me. You can change your generic orbit here. And in fact, I think if I make that black, yeah, that basically, I mean, it won't during the day. If I bring the atmosphere back and the sun's up, I'll see all these black orbits. But in the night sky, or when the atmosphere is taken away, that also takes away the orbits of the Vestas and Junos and other planetoids and dwarf planets, as they're called, and asteroids, whatever, that I might not want to see right away. So obviously you can see I can change minor planets versus dwarf planets and whatever, right? So play with that on your own time. It's something we've looked at before. Sorry to be redundant in some senses, but I know this is a lot of information. I think the wonderful thing about presenting this by video is that you can pause and you can make your own notes if you want. One of our students asked if there would be a PDF about Stellarium. Not for me, no. We'll see some PDFs probably about course material as we move along. But Stellarium, again, a wonderful software that you can utilize to help you integrate the course material on the small screen. Certainly the big screen is where it's at, but I encourage you to play with Stellarium. Absolutely not mandatory. And some people have written that they don't have computers at this time, and okay, orbits of moons of planets, that's not our moon. So where is she? I mean, I'm interested. There is this button to click, which is show orbit for selected planet only, which I would really encourage you to have, because once we get all these orbits in, I mean, it's helpful now that I've done some color coding. There's a strange thing about Stellarium that it's only going to show the orbits for the planets that are above ground at this time, which can be a bit tricky. Here's moon though. So if I click moon, I should only see moon's orbit. And I'm seeing that it's black, okay? And what that tells me actually is that moon's color, for some reason, is defaulted to the generic orbit. And I might find a way around that, but since I certainly want to see moon, I want moon to be silver, I'm going to make silver be the color for all generic orbits. And unfortunately, that means if I click off of the moon, I'm going to see all these silver orbits all over the place. But if I click the moon, now I will see moon. And since ecliptic is sun's path, these are the lunar nodes, something we will certainly be speaking much about. All right. That's enough of that for now. And for now, I'm going to take all of these orbits away. There's a keyboard shortcut that's O for orbits. All right, I like that one. And some of them, as I showed before, I don't dig too much. So we're going to see how to change some of those. And absolutely not necessary, but I would encourage you to go with similar keyboard shortcuts that I'm using, because I'll be saying things. Let's bring the ecliptic in. I'm going to hit E, right? So right now, if I hit E, what comes in is this equatorial grid. And that's not what I want it to be. So equatorial grid's going away, ground's coming back in. I made a bunch of changes, so I'm going to save my settings. And now in this menu, to navigation, edit keyboard shortcuts. I want to say one of the students, Kara, suggested clicking a button here that helps us return to our standard view with the click of a button. And I should have paid more attention. Auto zoom out returns to initial direction of view. And that's not in default one. And I'm going to click that. So that's in tools, right? And main, I'll save that setting. And I think we'll see a keyboard shortcut that we can utilize to get in and out of that. I'm still tripping on what these lights are. Oh, and I'm noticing trees, which is not zero landscape. So somehow that changed on me. So sky and viewing options, landscapes. And it looks like I didn't get to save zero horizon. So I'm going there now. And I see that those lights went away. Those must have been city lights that I was tripping on. I'm not used to seeing because I usually work with the zero horizon. I'm going to save my settings. And I occasionally like to quit out of here, as you have already noticed, and then come back in and see if those settings indeed registered. And so here we go. I have my meridian in. If I take the ground away, I can see I have my horizon in. I do have a zero horizon, which is easier to prove during the daytime. So if I get my clock up and just rewind some hours and bring this big star above the sky, it looks like for some reason zero horizon is not saving. I think there's a different button I have to click. So I'm going to go to 0 horizon, and right, it has used this landscape as default. So that's happening. I don't need landscape labels or illumination or fog, and I will use ground as my default. I don't know what that is, and I can't unclick it anyway. And this is add remove landscapes, a very cool thing to do. I mentioned that briefly in another one of the videos. We're not going to mess with that now, but I would encourage you to check it out on your own. You can bring in like the pyramids of Giza and Stonehenge and other great places. All right, so now because I clicked use this landscape as default, I don't think I even have to save that setting. Let's quit out of here and come back in and see how that did. And hopefully I'm coming back in on a 0 landscape. It looks like it, but it looked that way before. If I take the sun back up above the horizon, and especially if I bring in the light. Keyboard shortcut A for atmosphere. I see indeed that that's saved a 0 horizon. Okay. I'm also seeing, it's easier to see with the light on, that it's not quite flat, which I would like. And there we go. All right, so I'm going to go to this moment now. I'm going to hit pause. And because I just flattened the horizon too, I'm going to go into our configuration window and save view. All right. So the last thing to look at here is these keyboard shortcuts. So navigation, set configuration, navigation, edit keyboard shortcuts. And you're going to see that there's a ton of them here. All right. So I'm certainly not going to describe what all of these things do. I encourage you, if you really want to play, to look at them, mess around with it. This is something interesting that I've actually never messed with. I think this for a Mac is Alt command 09618, whatever. I actually want to play that game really quickly. Well, no, I don't, because I want to look for this button that's like return to the standard view. You can see some zooms here. Oh, go to home. I actually think that is like home on my computer. Anyway, I don't know that I'm learning that right now. And I'm supposed to be teaching, not learning. What's the difference? All right, so there's different specific keyboard shortcuts we could set up for archaeo lines. We might do that later in the course. But right now, just look at the date and times, moving through a sidereal day versus a tropical day and such. Those are cool things to know, or solar day versus sidereal day. We'll talk about that some. We looked at these before, how we can use these keyboard shortcuts of J to decrease time speed and L to increase when the thing's playing, to move to very kind of fast forward or fast rewind. Or K brings us back to 1 second equals 1 second in the software. Set time rate to 0. In other words, pause is the keyboard shortcut 7. And 8 brings us to the time now, both very useful ones. And so there's a lot of great default settings already made. You can see atmosphere A, azimuthal grid, Z. I really don't use that grid so much, so that might also go away for me. We'll see. I mean, the second lesson is going to focus on azimuth and altitude a little bit, or maybe that's the third. I don't have the curriculum right in front of me, so maybe we'll bring that in then. Constellation art, keyboard shortcut, art, see? Constellation boundaries, labels, yada, 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 right? Constellations are C. But here's something that I want to change. The ecliptic line is something I utilize a lot. And I just think of E as the ecliptic. We can see it here. I suggested we use the ecliptic as something that we bring in by default. I'm actually going to take it away in the first lesson. We'll bring it back in the second lesson. But I want a keyboard shortcut, and I want it to be E. So I'm going to go to ecliptic line, and I'm going to erase this shortcut, which is comma, and I'm going to hit E. And uh-oh, I get the red mark. Why? Because the equatorial grid is already set at E. Okay, so what I'm going to go down there is I'm just going to switch these two. I'm going to give the equatorial grid the comma. And actually what I'll do, I have to get rid of the ecliptic line, because if I just say comma here, I'm going to find that that's what the ecliptic line is. I could say like comma U or something that might change things. I don't know. And as I'm hitting delete, that's actually a button, right? So you have to delete things with this button in the keyboard shortcut settings. All right. So I want to take the ecliptic line and I'm going to get rid of that comma like that and then hit apply. And now it has no keyboard shortcut. I'm going to go equatorial grid. I'm going to get rid of the E. I'm going to replace it with the comma, apply, and then back up to ecliptic line and give that the E, apply. Okay. And so now if I'm clicked here in the planetarium, I can hit E. Oh, it doesn't necessarily seem to be working. Let me get out of some of these menus. Yeah, there we go. I'm clicking E and there goes the ecliptic. All right. Just like I can click H. There goes the horizon. G, there goes the ground. H, there goes, brings the horizon back in. G brings the ground back in. E brings the ecliptic back in. A, atmosphere in and out. So there's another one that I was saying before. M brings the Milky Way in and out by default, but I like the Milky Way around personally. And the meridian is something that I bring in and out so often, and I just think of meridian as M. So back to configuration window, tools, no navigation, edit keyboard shortcuts, and I'm going to look down at the meridian. And let's say here it is as a semicolon. I'm going to get rid of that, and I'm going to say M. And as you knew what's going to happen, I think at this point, it says no, the Milky Way is M. So fine, I'm going to go down to Milky Way. I'm going to take that away and apply. Now it's nothing. Meridian line, I'm going to erase the semicolon, and I'm going to make that M and apply. All right. Milky Way, maybe Milky Way gets W. Is W already taken? Yeah. Remove section of constellation, maybe. I'm not sure. Don't know what it is. Doesn't need a W in my book. So the W is going away there. I'm applying it. Now we see it has nothing. And I'm going to go back to Milky Way. And since I took the M for meridian, Milky Way is going to get W. And then I click apply. Okay. Planet trails. Some really cool things in here. And actually, it's a fun way to learn some of the options of Stellarium and the features of Stellarium that aren't obvious. Like I've never used a lot of these different things. P is the planets. That's nice. S is the stars. That makes sense, right? And one more that I want to bring in. I mean, we'll do this further on in the chapters anyway. But I like having the galactic equator as an option. It's something I show when I'm teaching about galactic alignment. And especially for me, I'm thinking about galactic alignment as the solstice is at the galactic cross. And so X has kind of been my galactic equator shortcut. I'm shocked to find that X isn't already used, but it's not. Oh, two more that I'm going to do. Equinox points. Well, the equinox points in the tropical zodiac are 0 Aries and 0 Libra. And I'm going to think of that as A. Since I know A is already devoted to the atmosphere, I'm going to say Shift A. All right, and that brings that in. It's not taken. Apply. Similarly, I'm going to look at the solstice points. And I'm going to give them for Cancer and Capricorn, the tropical solstice points, right? I'm going to give them Shift C for Cancer, Capricorn. All right. I think those are the only ones that I'm going to do right now. Again, you can look through here and you can play. So applying that, and I see that it's there. And notice as well that I did that for solstice points, not solstice J2000 points. I revealed in one of the previous training videos, I have no idea what J2000 is. We went over to Wikipedia to learn a little bit. I didn't learn it. So at some point, that's on my list of things to learn. All right, so I think for me, that's enough of keyboard shortcuts. I imagine during the course, we'll get in there, we might change some different things, and you can make your own. You know, others might make more sense to you than these ones. I just want to see, equator line is period, which actually sits okay with me. I just need to remember what it is. Okay. Cool. So, you know, the ecliptic grid is something I want to bring in as well. And I personally think of the ecliptic grid as the zodiac. We saw Z was used before, I think for the azimuthal grid. So if I click Z here and setting up a primary shortcut for ecliptic grid, we see that it's already being used for azimuthal grid. Well, I don't really use that grid. Maybe I'll learn to. And maybe we will during the course. We'll see. But for now, bye-bye Z for azimuthal grid. Apply. And hello Z for ecliptic grid. Not the J2000 grid, but just ecliptic grid. So when we saw earlier parentheses of date, here it's not saying of date at all. It's just saying nothing. All right. So ecliptic grid for me is getting the Z for zodiac. Apply. And we're out. And I'm going to go to the main configuration window. Let's start from the top here. Configuration, monkey wrench star, main, save settings. So we just did a whole lot of things. All right. Here is that ecliptic grid, Z for zodiac. Sweet. 345 degrees. Well, that's 15 from 360. 360 in a circle is 0, which means it is the Aries point. I can confirm that with a new keyboard shortcut I just set. Shift A, Aries point, which also gets me the Libra point because that's what I set for the equinoxes, okay? And that means 345, 15 degrees shy of tropical 0 Aries is what? 15 degrees tropical Pisces. Cool. So the ecliptic grid can be really useful. I could look at that celestial equator, which is the period, and we'll see that blue curve, and we will see that where the celestial equator and the ecliptic planes cross are the equinox points. We will learn that more slowly during the course of the course, but the places where the ecliptic and the equator are most separated are the solstice points, okay? Well, if 0 by ecliptic degree is 0 degrees Aries, 0 degrees Cancer is going to be 90 degrees from there, right? So I can look up here and I see 90. Well, I bet you on the ecliptic plane, if I hit Shift C, I will find the 0 Cancer degree. All right, so Z to get my zodiac away, Shift C and Shift A takes away the solstice and the equinox points, period takes away that celestial equator. And now I'm basically set up with things that I personally want in Stellarium when I come into Stellarium. You know, G for ground. And we see the cross of matter inside the circle of spirit. Or is it this cross of matter in this circle of spirit? Especially perhaps if we view from somewhere like the Tropic of Capricorn. Oh, right. So that's something I had set up recently. Oh, it's still here, actually. I'm surprised to see that this place which I created, and we'll see how to do that as we move along, even though I returned to default settings, it looks like this location I created did not get erased. So that's cool to see. I could delete it from the list, but I don't want to. I'll be right there right now. Because I want to show you this cool thing that, especially if I get the 0 Aries point rising from the Tropic of Capricorn, we get kind of a better look, I guess, at what we might consider the earth glyph of the cross of matter inside the circle of spirit. Or likewise, I could bring the celestial equator in, take the ecliptic away, and go somewhere like the equator. So I could type in Quito, which is so close to the equator in Ecuador, right? Named for this reason. Or I could even set up a new location. And I think I'm going to do that actually. This longitude here is West Coast. All right, so we're probably not going to go hang out here in the middle of the Pacific. Easter Island's not too far away, but it's not that close either. But it's helpful for me as we zoom around to look at places like the Tropic of Capricorn or the Tropic of Cancer, which I haven't put in yet. So I'm going to change that to north. And now we're at the Tropic of Cancer. And the reason why I have Pacific time zone is because I know it's at the same latitude as my home. Seattle is in the Pacific time zone. Sorry, not latitude, longitude, right? So we'll be looking at the tropics in depth as we move along because they're really key to the zodiac, at least the tropical zodiac, and they apply in all of the zodiacs that I'm aware of. And they apply for themes like precession of the equinoxes and galactic alignment themes that we'll be looking into. So here's Tropic of Cancer, Pacific time zone. I'm going to add that to the list. And if I reset my list now, if I hit Tropic, I'll see that I have a Tropic of Cancer or a Tropic of Capricorn. Pretty cool things happen when you bounce back and forth. Another location I'm going to create right now is an equator at Pacific time zone. What's the latitude of the equator? 0, right? So I'm going to call this equator, Pacific time zone, add to the list. I like to reset my location list after I add one and then type that in and make sure it showed up. Here's equator, Pacific time zone, this one that I just created. And I think I'll show you in Stellarium some of these things also as we move through the content of the course. But for now, I'll just show you that at the equator, when we look not at the ecliptic, but at the celestial equator, we always see this perfect earth glyph, the cross of matter formed by the meridian, the spine of Gaia, and the horizon. Within the circle of spirit, which I claim is actually this golden circle, the ecliptic, not the blue circle, the celestial equator. But this is where we are going to start on Sacred Astronomy for Astrologers Webcourse Lesson 1. So I will see you then. I hope this has been instructive. If you choose to play along in Stellarium, for the last time, this is all totally optional. I'm heading back. I actually don't think I have to go back to my default location before I save my settings and close down, but I'm going to do so anyway. Well, you know what, I'm not, because I want my default settings to have ecliptic, not the celestial equator. I'm going to go to now. Remember that was keyboard shortcut 8 and 7 was pause. Or L was move through time and another L will speed it up and I can just keep L'ing. Or K to bring it back to 1 second. Or I can speed it up with L's and then I can do J's to slow down the forward. I can even keep doing J's until suddenly we're bringing it back in time, right? And K to stop, and 8 for now, and 7 to pause. So if you want to play Stellarium, and I really, really, once again, highly encourage you do, get to know these keyboard shortcuts. They will save you lots of time, especially if you, like I, wish to start showing other people things in the sky, or at least in the software of the sky, this wonderful program Stellarium, as they correlate to the astrological chart wheel. And I'm glad that you are here because you have an interest in learning the chart to sky correlations. And I'll just say, you know, the big screen is the true way to integrate the material of this course. You can just watch the videos and you'll learn a bunch, and that's wonderful. But if you really want to integrate this information, you'll hear this from me again and again. It's about getting outside under the sky. And when, like right now, when I'm looking out my window in Seattle, where it's pretty dang cold out there anyway, clouds are in, I can't see a star in the sky, I might come in here and play with Stellarium a little bit. And Stellarium, again, is also nice because I could just say, well, negative 23,500. And this is something I've noticed recently. If I want to go to 23,500 BC, or BCE, as people like to say these days, I've got to type it in AD and then click over here and hit negative. And suddenly I'm way back when, and could even show that back in those days, the Aries point was in the constellation of the fish as well. It's actually very close to where it is today. Why? Because this is one precessional cycle ago. But maybe I want to check it out in like the year 3500 BC, when the Aries point was in the constellation of the Bull, very close to Aldebaran, the star we've started getting to know. Taking my art away, my constellations, my equinox points, my celestial equator, and I'm getting out of here, friends. Thanks for joining for another Stellarium training video. Brevity is not my forte, and we've seen a lot of redundancies here, but that's part of the yoga, right? That's part of the practice, right? Like getting, you know, I'm a saxophone player. It's like playing slow and getting that muscle memory so we can learn to play quick. So that'll be a theme throughout our next 6 weeks together as well. I'm very excited that you've decided to join this course, and launch is very soon. See you in space.